episode of C-Suite Conversations with Scott Miller. That's me, I'm your host, where every Thursday on behalf of the Franklin Covey Company, I'm privileged to interview some of our nation's most influential members of the C-Suite. Oftentimes they are both public or private organizations from every walk of life, industry, organization, you name it. Today, I'm honored to be interviewing the CEO of Acquisition.com. You know her as Leila Hormozi. She's joining us from the balmy temperature in Las Vegas today in the middle of the summer. Leila, welcome to C-Suite Conversations.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
First and foremost, most importantly, shouldn't you be escaping Las Vegas in the middle of July? Seems like there are other more temperate climates you could decamp to.
You know, funny enough is that we've lived here for 3 years, and we just got our first headquarters here, which I'm now operating out of. So I don't want to leave because now we have, about 70% of our team is here in person.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, not to mention Nevada is a very friendly state for business as well, so I get it. Let's talk a little bit about your journey. Although you are the CEO of Acquisition.com, and I want to have you talk about that company in and of itself, I'd also would love to have you rewind. You were born where, and then what happened? Because I think what is a commonality of viewers and listeners to this podcast is they enjoy to hear someone's journey, and then what happened, and then what happened. So talk a bit about Acquisition.com, rewind a couple of decades, and bring us up to date.
Yeah, so I actually come from Portage, Michigan, so Midwest. I stayed there until I was about 20. And so right before I graduated college, actually, I packed up my car, not knowing anybody, drove across the country to California, where I pursued a career in fitness. And so I moved out there. I did my best to get a job at anywhere that would take me, which I was in fitness, so it was a gym. And then I took a job at the gym that was closest that I could walk to, so I wouldn't have to pay for gas. And then that is where I learned that, not everything I had learned in school translated into business. And so I had learned a lot about product. I'd learned a lot about exercise and fitness. I hadn't learned a lot about marketing or sales or reputation or brand or any of those things that make a business work. And so as soon as I started working in the industry, that's what I realized my gap was, which is I didn't know how to get customers from scratch, and I didn't know how to sell customers. I was very passionate about helping people and about changing people's lives. I didn't understand how to monetize that. And so then I got my first job at this gym. I then took those clients and went to a smaller gym and had a private, I would say group of 20 people that I trained, as well as online. And I was at this point where I was trying to figure out if I wanted to open up my own facility or take all my clients online and do an online business, because back then that was not that popular. And at that time, I met my now business partner and husband, Alex, and we actually ended up starting a company called Gym Launch. And that company, neither of us, he owned a couple gyms. I had my personal training business. Neither of us had grown a large company before. And about after a year and a half of, I would say being in the dirt and being in what I call the swamp of shit, which is making no money, burning your last dollar, barely having anything. We kind of hit a stride and got lucky to a degree, and it worked. And then that company went from 0 to 27 million in 2 years with 17 million in profit. So obviously that's very successful for somebody who's 23 and never had a company before. And then that company is still around, grew. We grew it for about 6 years. We started another company on top of that called Prestige Labs. We sold them together about 3 years ago. And then we started Acquisition.com as a family office. And so we kind of have taken it from a family office into a little bit more of a traditional private equity group, as well as we have a few things that we do differently because we've taken a different approach since we're entrepreneurs first, which is our real mission is to make business education available for everybody. And so we have books that we write, we have free courses and content we put out there, we have workshops that we run, and then we have our portfolio where we invest in businesses. And so, I did not start off with any traditional knowledge. I didn't go to any kind of business school. I didn't even take a business class in high school. I learned everything on the go, and that's kind of been how I've done most everything in life when it's come to learning what I have learned to grow the businesses I have now. And it's worked out decently well. So I hope that was a good synopsis of my journey.
It was so good. I might actually throw away all the questions I had prepared because I want to tease some things out of that, because I think you are an entrepreneur's entrepreneurs. I want to go deeper into 3 or 4 things you said. When you were at an inflection, before the inflection point, you were at a potential end, right? You mentioned it was sort of not working and you were on your last dollar. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that actually can relate to that. And was there a lesson that you could teach right now to all the listeners, founders, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, to say, think this way, hold on, pivot? What are some things you could do to not give false hope to entrepreneurs, but maybe you look back on it to say, you know, it just took a change of this or a double down of that. What could you teach us?
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway that I've had with my entire career is that you can't lose if you don't quit. And I've taken that from my very early lessons because honestly, those were really dark times. Like, I remember being so stressed that, you know, I tossed and turned all night for those first 2 years. Like, I was constantly exhausted. I was drinking probably 4 coffees a day. You know, my personal life was a mess. I gained weight. I was just very stressed. And, you know, I remember thinking in the moments that I was like, wow, it would be a lot easier if I just had taken a more predictable route. That and I'd heard people say it before, you know, like grown up listening to Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn and all these people, and I was just like, I just can't give up. And, you know, the reason that I didn't want to give up is because I always ask myself this question, which is, will I respect myself more or less for this choice or this decision or this path I take? And for me, giving up, I would lose respect for myself. And giving up doesn't mean, not giving up doesn't mean that you don't change things or you don't try something different or you don't change pieces of your business, but it means that you keep moving forward. And so for me, that's the biggest lesson that I've had. And, you know, in the business, what actually ended up happening was that it was just a small change in the model. And I've seen that so often with entrepreneurs, which is you have this immense bucket of talent, right? Or this bucket of skills that this person has, but they just don't know the best way to take those skills or take that bucket and create value for customers. And at the time, what we had done is we had basically built this business where we were turning around gyms, you could say. It's almost like a bar rescue, but for gyms. And so we would fly people out to these facilities. They would go there. They would sell 100, 200 customers into this gym. But what was happening was that the gym owners couldn't keep the customers. You know, they hadn't acquired the skills yet to do that at that scale. And so it ended up backfiring on us. People were upset with the results that we had driven. Almost like it's just like they weren't ready for it. And so, you know, we were actually really considering, like, should we change the model? Should we go to something different? And so we're calling up these gym owners that we have lined up for the next month that we're supposed to send out our sales team to go sell into their gyms. And we're saying, I'm so sorry, but I think that we're going to have to put a pause on this. We're going to revisit if we want to keep doing this in this way. And so I'm really sorry, but we can't fly anybody out. And they were like, listen, I will not make it if you don't fly somebody out. I called you guys. I signed up for this because I'm on my last dollar. And so I don't have a choice. And we were like, well, we can't fly somebody out. Like, we're just not going to do that right now because we really just don't even know if this is the right thing to do. And the first guy said this. He said, well, why don't you just teach me what you teach your guys that you fly out here? You don't have to come out here. You don't have to fly anybody out. Just like teach me what you're doing with them. Like, I'll pay you whatever. And we were like, I mean, okay, you know, sure. And so we literally just like, I throw out a price, right? You know, however many $1,000. Called up every other person. The same conversation happened. What did that teach me? 1, listen to your customers. 2, the hard way is not always the best way. You know, the way that we were doing it before took an immense amount of manpower, logistical effort, all of those things. But it wasn't the best way to deliver value to the customer because we thought that what they wanted was us to do it for them. But at that point in time with that market, they actually wanted to learn how to do it for themselves. And that actually ended up being our slogan. It was, we don't fish for you, we teach you how to fish for yourself. And so that actually ended up being why we were able to become the market leader in general, was because we just realized that they wanted autonomy and they wanted information. They wanted no BS information more than they wanted us to go do it for them.
So was that the inflection point of where the business took off, is when you were seriously questioning your business model? You were even questioning whether you had a go-forward strategy. You were telling your clients, we really can't serve you right now. And the client said, well, then teach me. And that was the flip of the entire business model?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was when everything changed for my entire life. And I think it was just like being willing to to change quickly, to adapt. That's one thing I've never been scared to do is just try. It's like we have all these theories in our heads, and I have so many business owners I talk to every week who say, I don't know, should I do this, or this? I'm like, listen, dude, any of those could work, but you have to figure out a way to try each one of them in a low risk environment and just see like, if it doesn't work, let's try something else. And that doesn't mean anything personal about you. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It means that you're smart for trying something.
It's interesting. There's a very famous book written by Clayton Christensen and Karen Dillon from the Harvard Business School. It's called How Will You Measure Your Life? And in it, they quote a statistic where north of 90% of successful companies, they quantify it as companies that achieved financial success, more than 90% did so with what they termed an emergent strategy, not the deliberate strategy they set out with. And I think you are a perfect example of where you started is not the same service, just different business model. Is that accurate? Similar service.
Yeah, same skills and raw, I would say, like value, just packaged differently.
Let's talk about some lessons that you've learned, because you've been willing to be very vulnerable right now. As you look at other leaders on executive leadership teams, public or private companies, other C-level team members, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned about culture, system creations, leadership, growth? Take that anywhere you'd like to go. Give us 3 or 4 lessons that maybe you learned the hard or easy way, because you're an expert in all of those things, right? Helping people put systems in place and manage and lead. Riff on that.
Yeah, I think the biggest one that I've come to realize, I would say in my more recent years, that I just see as a trend is people are not stupid. More often, leaders and managers are actually not the best teachers. And so there's this, I'm sure you hear it all the time, where people are like, oh, my team they're not cutting it, they're not this, they're all these things, right? And I, even in the very beginning, I think used to say that at times. I was like, gosh, how do they not get it? How's this not clicking? Maybe these people I knew people, right? And that was when, 9 years ago when I was a new leader. And I look back at it now and I'm like, wow, I see now that I was just not a good teacher. And the old saying goes, it's like the student, right? Like the lower level of the teacher, the higher level the student must be. And so I think that's true in all aspects of leadership in terms of having a company, which is, I think a lot of leaders don't invest in learning how to teach. And I think that's such a strategic advantage, especially nowadays when people have so many things that they can do to make money. They don't need to take a job. You're not competing against your competitor anymore. You're competing against them posting something on eBay, them having a little Amazon business or an Etsy store or something like that. And so we have to think, what does talent really want from us now? And in my opinion, that's growth, that's opportunity, that's learning, right? And that's being in a culture where they're not going to accept what people maybe in 10 or 50 years ago accepted, right? They have a new level that they are, I would say, like demanding of leadership. And in my perspective, the only way that people survive that is by learning to be good teachers. And I myself have found probably the most amount of fulfillment out of being a teacher, more than anything else in my entire career. Like, why do I like doing what I do? I love teaching. And that's something that I've had to learn over time, because you have to be a student first, right? And in the very beginning, I'm 23, I started my first company, I didn't know anything, right? And so I was only a student. I barely had room to understand what it meant to be a teacher. But now that I'm in the position I'm in, I see that that's everything. When I look at my friends with that run multi-billion-dollar companies, the amount of engineering that goes into making sure that they teach people at all levels and continue to provide people with opportunities. It's what I think about every day when I wake up. It's what I think about all the time. It's what I spend most of my time on, is how do I facilitate a culture of learning, of growing, and how do I assemble a leadership team that disseminates all that teaching down to everybody else in the organization. And so I think that's the first thing. And a lot of people, instead, they just go the easy button of, I just hired stupid people, I need new people. It's like, all right, well, you're going to run that old really quick. And you're going to get a bad reputation. You're not going to have consistency with customers. And honestly, I just ask people this. I'm like, do you really want to walk into your work every day and feel like people don't look up to you as the leader of your own company? And for me, that's always been a hallmark. It's like, I want to walk into my building and feel like people are glad that I'm there, not happy I'm gone. I would say that the second thing that I notice, especially with having access to the portfolio CEOs we have and working closely with them, is the CEO or the founder's time, and this can go to any leader, but right, like somebody in the C-suite, their time is one of the most valuable resources in the entire company. And that's something that I see takes a lot of leaders time to learn, is because in the beginning, and for a lot of your career, you want people to know that you're willing to scrub the toilets. And I've always been that person. I definitely, when it goes to like arrogant versus insecure, I err on the side of insecure. So I will be like, I will scrub the toilets because so-and-so's gone, right? Just because I want my team to know that I'm going to work my butt off because I want to set the example. But at some point, when you're growing your business, you can no longer be that person because your time needs to be spent on things that are constantly growing the business or growing the people. And I think that what I've seen is, I always tell our leaders, I say, I always know if I'm leveling up myself or leveling up my business by my calendar. I look at my calendar and see how greatly has my calendar changed quarter over quarter. And if it hasn't changed much and the business hasn't changed much, I've just seen this correlation over the last 9 years I've been in business, which is the more my calendar, aka where I spend my time, goes to the right things to grow the business, the more the business grows. And so it's this odd like dichotomy, because it's like you don't want people to think you're too good for certain things, but at the same time you have to learn, like you have to get into this mindset of my time is one of the most valuable things this company has. It's not even the money, right? It's my time, because as a C-level executive, your time creates money. And so where you spend it is so important. But especially for a great leader, somebody who's humble, right? Like the best leaders out there, they actually struggle the most with this because they don't want to look like that arrogant leader that people don't want to follow. And so for me, it's having to have a level of transparency with my team where I tell them, hey, I'm at a point where I just realized, this was this week for me. I said, I just realized I talked to, 3 of my friends who have $10 billion, whatever companies, right? Friends, mentors. And I said, can I see your calendar? I looked at their calendar, I looked at my calendar, and I was like, this isn't it. Leila can't get her company to 10 billion operating this way. A discrepancy I saw, none of them had even an hour-long meeting on their calendar. Not one, right? How many hour-long meetings do I have? 10. And so, I was like, how do I start getting there? Well, by where I put my time. And so I would say that's the second thing that I see a lot in leadership is just how this balance of being the person that can get in the weeds, but also remembering that your time is very valuable to the company. At the end of the day, you are a servant to the company. At least that's how I see it. It's like, I'm here to serve the company because the company serves everybody here. And so my best way to do that is to make sure I'm really prudent with my time.
Leila, what should our listeners and viewers take away from the fact that these mentors of yours that have been very successful didn't have hour-long meetings? Because that seems very normal in the corporate world. Teach us the insight to be learned there.
There's too many niceties in the workplace. And I talked to my team about this, which is you don't want to hurt people's feelings. The reality is that for me, for example, I identified after this, by all my meetings today and yesterday, I said, how long did I really need to be in that meeting? And honestly, there was not one meeting that I needed to be there more than 10 minutes. But people feel like there's this weird, I would say, like nicety, or it's like being nice or polite, where it's like, I don't want to tell them that they don't need to be in the whole meeting. I'm like, no, you're doing them a favor. They don't want to be in this whole meeting. They want to be doing stuff that's productive. Nobody likes being in a meeting when they feel like, you know what, this could have been an email. I could have reviewed it by myself. I could have probably done something more productive if it was in Asana or Monday.com. And so I think it's a cultural thing. And I've tried really hard with our team. I continue to say this over and over, which is like, I constantly remind them, like, if you don't need to be in a meeting, don't be in a meeting. Decline the meeting. Say, thank you for inviting me, but I've got to do this instead. Saying no doesn't mean that saying no is not offensive. I think that's the first thing. And then I would say the second piece is that I think a lot of the times people use meetings for the wrong reason. A lot of people use meetings to make decisions. But if you look at the studies done on this, people make better decisions specifically off meetings. Because if you think about the dynamics on a meeting, you're like, there's somebody on there as a C-level, and you have these 2 people who you know what they're going to say if you say the thing you really want to say or make the decision you really want to make. And then you have these people over here who you feel like you're being watched by. And so something I've moved towards is that I give the information ahead of time. On meetings, I might have people present information, but I don't have people make decisions on meetings. In fact, whoever the decision maker or makers are will have their own time to make those decisions off of the meeting. Because I have noticed that it creates a more collaborative culture. There's not this feeling of competition, and it makes for a way more productive meeting and usually better decisions. And so I think that there's also, just in terms of understanding human dynamics and behavior and how we affect one another in the workplace, there's all these underlying dynamics of like competition, feeling you have to one-up somebody, seeing somebody else as like, you're almost competitive with them. Like we try our best in every workplace to get rid of those things, but they exist. And so being mindful of those things, are we really going to make the best decision with 20 people on this call? Like, I've just never seen that happen.
Leila, what's your superpower? Like, what, other than teaching, what are you great at that you would attribute to your success? Financial, your influence as a thought leader. Check your humility. What are you phenomenal at?
I think I'm just really honest. Like, if I had to say one thing, I'm honest with myself and honest with others, and I do not hold back from my team. I'm very transparent, and that's with my team, with my CEOs, with customers, because that's my number one value, I would say. And so I think a lot of people crave that in the workplace, a feeling, and they feel safe because they know I won't lie to them and I won't sugarcoat it. I will never be mean, and I'm not punishing, and I don't yell. I've never once yelled at somebody, but I won't BS anybody either. And I think that I've learned, I think in the beginning, when I was a younger leader, the way I presented things, it's like I would be honest, but I was also kind of robotic, you know what I mean? And then I realized that that's not really trustworthy either, because you feel like you don't know the person. And so I feel like as I've tapped more and more into what my superpower is, I would say it's honesty mixed with authenticity, which is like my team sees all of me. They see all sides of me, even in terms of like how we create content, how I speak on stages. Like, I don't hold back. If like my heels are bothering me, I take my heels off on stage. I don't care. Like, that's just who I am. If I'm having a bad day, I let my team know. I never emotionally dump on them. I don't cry in front of them, but I let them know and I tell them what happened. I don't hide things. And so I think that for me, I've worked at places where I did not feel safe and I didn't feel like loyal to that leader. And a lot of it was they weren't honest with me and they didn't loop me in on anything. So I felt like I was constantly in the dark. And I told myself, if I ever run a company, I would like to make people feel the opposite way.
When you invest in enterprises, companies, startups through acquisition.com, what do you look for? How much of your energy is focused on the founders, the character, their competence, their collaboration versus the business model, the profitability, the market opportunity, the competition? What are some of the key lenses that you look through?
Well, the idea would be that both are there, right? Which is you have a very large market and they have gotten hold of an opportunity that there's not much competition in yet, right? However, if we find that and the founder or the CEO, I would say the leadership team is, I always use this as a litmus test, which is like, can I get great talent to work for this person? And if I don't think that they can attract and retain good talent, I won't invest in the company.
Because of that person's character or maturity or self-awareness, all those things.
I would say there's three things, right? There's competitive greatness. We use these to essentially rate CEOs. Competitive greatness, which is they're not just in it for the money, but they're in it because they want to be excellent. They want to be a better person. They're looking for the personal growth that comes with owning a business and running one, right? The second piece is sincere candor, which they're honest, and they can have the hard conversations in a way that doesn't feel punishing to people. And then the last piece is unimpeachable character, which is like, not only are they great in the workplace, but are they great in life? Are they a great person to know? Do you want to be associated with them? Would you be proud to say that this person is your boss, your company that you invested in, your friend? And so when I think of what makes a great leader, I think of those three traits, and that's how I evaluate them through those lenses. Because at the end of the day, if you have great people, then they can change the strategy of the business. If they need to pivot, they can pivot the business. In fact, the best teams, they do all of those things, and they actually do it with ease, and they actually thrive in that environment. But if you don't have a great leader, you can never capitalize on any of it. And I can't even tell you the amount of times that, in the last 3.5 years that we've looked at businesses investing in, many from 3.5 years ago that we looked at, and I said, I know this business is like a rocket right now, but like, I just feel like this rocket is going to just explode and hit a star because of the person driving it. And actually this morning, I got a phone call about one business that we passed on. And that person, it seemed like it was too good to be true. And I remember saying to my team, like, I just feel like there's something off. I don't feel sincere candor. Like listening to the answers that are given, they're not consistent. It seems like they're hiding something. Turns out they defrauded the investors that did invest in the business. So, it's like you can have the best opportunity ever in front of you, but if you don't have a person with character willing to capitalize on it, you lose it.
I want to just put a pin in this, or put maybe an exclamation point on it, because you're the first person I've ever interviewed that has said it this way. In essence, when I asked you what is the number one criteria you look for in investing in a company, it was, can the leader attract great talent to work for him or her? That's in essence what you said. And that is so telling. So for anybody out there that's looking to raise money, looking to attract investors, what a great mirror to hold up to yourself to say, do you pass that test? I'm mindful of our time. I want to ask you another question about talent. I happen to be the father with my wife of 3 young boys, 10, 12, and 14. And I often ask a lot of my guests the same question. What are the skills that our sons would need to be hired by you 6, 8, 10 years from now?
Yeah.
Answer that however you want.
Well, we actually have a rubric, so I'm like trying to remember the rubric right now because there's 7, which is not 3 to remember. Team player. I think that learning to be a team player and being a great team player is more valuable than knowing how to present, knowing how to run a meeting, knowing how to make a video, knowing how to analyze business. I can teach all of those things. Team player is a compilation of a lot of skills that are much harder to teach.
Stop there, please. Stop there a second, because you hear this all the time, team player. I'd like for you to define that, because this is where the rubber meets the road. Because when I hear team player, I might think best idea wins. I might think you are aware of your presence in the room. You're able to collaborate. You're able to diffuse conflict. What does it mean to be a team player in your enterprise?
In my opinion, to be a good team player is somebody who can influence peers in a positive direction that moves the business forward.
There you go.
And so when I look at a great team player, I look at somebody who can get on a meeting and they are able, with their words, to get people to move in a positive direction. And those people are happy to do it. Because there's people who can manipulate and scare people. I don't consider that a team player, even though they get people to do something. But they're people who can use their influence in a way that gets people to take a positive action that grows the business. I consider that to be a team player. And I think that's a much harder skill to have.
Other competencies in the rubric.
Executive presence. I think this goes along, but what I've noticed is there's a lot of people who are really good at doing, and a lot of people are good at talking about what they do. So I'll actually just be vulnerable here. I've been a doer operator until I started making content a little over 2 years ago. And so learning how to represent myself and have, speak on stage and speak on podcasts, it's still, I would say, like not my number one skill. My number one skill is executing, right? And doing things. And so I see that a lot in my team, which I have people who can be so good at something they do. But again, it's like if the tree falls in the forest and nobody sees it fall, did it fall? This person's working over here, not communicating with anybody, not representing themselves, not showcasing their work to their boss. And so you don't actually know how good they are. And I can't tell you how many of these people there are in businesses. And so what I teach my team is executive presence, which is it's your job to put the megaphone to your work, to learn how to represent yourself to your peers, to your boss, to outside parties, to customers, to showcase that you are good. It's almost like internal marketing, right? It's like there's reputation, which is like what you're known for, and then there's marketing, which is getting eyeballs on that thing. It's almost like in a company, I think that some of the best people know how to tastefully showcase that they're good at something, which means learning how to communicate well, learning how to speak in groups of people, right? Learning how to collaborate with peers. It's honestly just communication. But I call it executive presence because I think it also commands respect in a room if you're able to represent yourself well.
Leila, I want to pitch you some questions and have you just rapid fire answers to me because I think you're going to be profound. The vast majority of people get fired because they...
Probably weren't a good fit in the first place and were picked wrong.
The people whose careers stall or become like a cul-de-sac are lacking what?
Hunger.
Those with the highest trajectories of influence avoid doing what?
Competing with their peers.
The people you respect the most that have experienced failure learn what from it?
To keep moving forward.
The trait you most admire in entrepreneurs is?
Resilience.
Leaders who lose their influence, it comes as a result of?
Pride.
The top skill every CEO needs to master is?
Influence.
The number one topic, subject, trend everyone needs to be paying attention to and learning about is?
I think every business or person should be making content.
Riff on that. What does that mean?
I mean, even, for people within an organization at this point in time, I don't look at people's resumes when I first am filtering for a job anymore. I look at their LinkedIn, their Instagram, their
Right.
Facebook, their Twitter.
Well said. Amen. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Absolutely. Yeah, I tell my clients all the time, my day job is I own a literary and a talent agency and a speakers bureau. And I tell my clients all the time, no one is going to your website. No one is going to your website. They're going to your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Instagram, your YouTube, your TikTok.
Yeah.
And then if what you have on there as your content is appealing, then they may go over to your website. Maybe.
That's exactly what I do.
Yep, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay, our time is ending. What's next on the horizon for you, other than great content from your LinkedIn profile? What should people be looking at from you in the future? What's coming?
I would say, gosh, what's coming? Hopefully a book in the future one day.
I know a guy, so we'll talk.
You know a guy? Yeah,
I think
okay.
you have lots of great skills
you.
and talents.
Honestly,
Leila,
I just want to be consistent with the content we put out while I grow the business. So that's my goal right now.
fantastic. Well, I wish you great success surviving perhaps one of the hottest summers on record in Las Vegas. Leila Hormozi from acquisition.com. I so appreciate talking to you today. I'm going to leave and have my wife and our 3 sons digest this interview because there's such great practical insights to be learning from an entrepreneur like yourself that has been at every stage of failure and success and growth. And it seems like you've really become a thought leader as it relates to the real way work gets done in organizations. It's not through utility power. It's not through coercive power or manipulative power. It's really through principle-centered power, right? Do you have the integrity and the competence to influence others to get the right things done, in essence, is what I hear from you.
Well, thank you. I hope to make that my message in the years to come.
Well, that's what I took away from you. So Leila Hormozi from acquisition.com, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Scott.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation from the C-Suite.